All right, thanks everybody for joining in. This is the Accelatis Essentials webinar. Today's session is going to be on the file structure explained, and we're just going to go through and show you all the files, folders, and stuff that you need to know, what's in where, something that hopefully you'll have a good understanding of when we're done today. The Essentials class is a 15-minute long session focused on specific subjects, so we will record this in case you missed something or want to review it later. And also there's no Q&A at the end, but if you have any questions, we'll flash up email addresses at the end so that your questions can be answered at that time. So we're going to talk about the file structure today of Accelatis and explain exactly what's going on. In most installations, this file structure is going to be probably 99.9% accurate. Certainly it's possible to have something slightly different, but if you look at your own environment, I'm sure you'll find exactly what I'm showing you here. So for the most part, you're going to put your Accelatis directory somewhere. Normally it's on a drive that has plenty of space, an E drive, something other than the C drive. But what you'll find is a parent folder off the root called Accelatis most of the time. And underneath that, you've got an Accelatis runtime directory, which really is just a container for all of the other directories. To be honest with you, it doesn't matter what the names are. It doesn't matter that the parent names are a certain thing. So if they're slightly different in your environment, that's quite okay. The Accelatis runtime directory is actually the directory that contains everything that's needed to run the software. And right at the root of that runtime directory, there are many shortcuts for commonly used executables, and again, you may already be used to just clicking on the shortcut in that directory to run something. So we're just going to dig in a little bit deeper and show you where the actual executables are and what they're used for. So I've got a little snapshot here of the folders that are under my 4.0 installation on the Accelatis runtime directory, and you can see a list of them here. And I'm just going to go through one by one and explain kind of what's in the directory and what you can use it for. The client directory contains all the files that you need to run the main Accelatis UI. The actual executable for the UI is called deploymentmanager.exe. And again, everything under there is all you need to run it. We also have a couple other executables under there that you might want to know about. One of them is the desktop widget, which is accdesktopwidget.exe. This is actually the little executable file that will launch that desktop widget in your tray on your Windows environment, so that you can actually pull up dashboards on your machine without having to go and log into the UI and stuff. And then there's also a little connectivity test.exe. In case you are running the client from a machine other than your server, you're going to want to make sure that you can connect to the port. Default server port is 8732. So this little utility, you could run it and it'll just hit the server, make sure that your firewalls are open and that it's available for your client to connect to. The next folder down was database scripts, and inside of this folder is everything that you need to create or upgrade an Accelatis database. Normally you don't have to touch that, but in the case where you might be trying to recreate an Accelatis DB or you're upgrading from some earlier version, it's nice to know that that's what's in there. We also have a documentation folder which contains all of our documentation that's currently being distributed in PDF format. Some of those are exposed in the client UI. If you click on Help, and you could see some guides down there, and those files are actually in here. But if you were to go to the file system and look inside that documentation folder, you'd see a couple more files in there, and feel free to browse those and see what information is in there. The next folder down is called ExpressLoad, and in previous versions it was known as the Ad Hoc Simulations Client. So you can pick, it's the same exact thing, obviously just the updated version, and you can see the ExpressLoad interface is still called accsimulations.exe, so that hasn't changed. And in this folder, we also have that same exact connectivity test executable. And again, the idea is that you might not be running ExpressLoad on the server. You can run it from anywhere you want, with the knowledge that you have to be connected to port 8732 in order to write information back. The next folder down is Help Desk Data Sources. This is actually a future Help Desk module. Don't believe it's activated out there yet. You will hear more about that very soon. And this folder contains a lot of the files that are necessary for that functionality to reach out to either the Oracle Help Desk or Zendesk for us. And again, right now you don't need to worry about it, but that is where some of those data sources are going to reside for the Help Desk module. There is an installer directory. And inside of the installer directory, there's an executable that you can run that will help either install Accelatis or even upgrade Accelatis. It's a compact UI. There's a lot of stuff going on in there. But if you want a place to go that you can reach out and update your files, this is what our services team uses to install. Again, it's there. That's what it is. Normally, you won't have to touch it, but that's what's in there. Next directory down is the load library. Inside the load library directory, we have base simulation packages, which means it's all the simulation packages that you can use to either run a user simulation health check or any of the stuff for express load. And you can also use these in automations, but they're not configured at all. This is just like the blank slate packages. They're organized by version, so when I show you later on the server, and I'm sure that you've seen underneath, you'll see like EPM 11.121, EPM 11.124, whatever you have. Each file might be slightly different for each version, so we've broken them down that way. And if you point your express load to that, it'll pull all those in, and that's where you can make your changes and stuff. Next directory down is called load site, and the load site directory contains all the files that you need to set up a remote client. So if you wanted to run the remote client in the foreground, you can launch ACC client agent console.exe. If you wanted to run it as a service, ACC client service.exe, they both do the same thing. Again, one's foreground, one's as a service. And the UI for this remote client is ACC client agent UI.exe. And of course, we pop in our connectivity tests again because as with the other things, to run a load site from a different location, you do need that connection to 8732. So we put that in there as well. Next directory down is called plugins. And this contains all the files for the available Windows plugins. And if you were to look, each plugin has its own directory. And inside that directory, you'll see a DLL, maybe a couple more things. But for the most part, this is exactly what you do when you go to enable either the HFM plugin or the planning plugin. It will go into this plugins directory and figure out what it has available for it. And again, the DLL will load all the stuff it needs to run it. There is an sbase folder under the plugins directory. In the older version, it'll be sbase 9.x. Both the same type of thing. And inside this folder, you will see a zip file, JWS6 zip file. And inside of this JWS6 file is another set of files. If you are using the sbase plugin, then you'll need this JWS6 file to be exploded somewhere, and I wanted to just run over quickly underneath the JWS6 directory if it's there. The important things to know is that you have a bin directory that contains your start and stop, the logs directory which contains all the logs both for the Apache server and for the actual agent. And then there's a web apps directory which contains the actual running files. And that one's sort of important because if you look right underneath that, I've passed out the location to something called WebXML, which many times when we're looking for settings for that JWS and how often it's talking to sbase, we'll ask for the settings in the WebXML. So I figured I would just show you pathed out where that is located. Next folder down, report definitions, contains the templates needed for the product to create reports. And for the most part, under your servers, you've got all of these directories, so you don't really have to think about it. But the report definitions is important on the client side in case your client is actually creating PDFs or different report styles and versions. You'll want to make sure that this directory is also located on your client directory. And then, of course, the last one is the server directory, which really contains the bulk of what you need for the for the whole agent host to run. Underneath the server directory, you will find the security user interface, which is called accaccountmanager.ex.exe, which is where you would go to either add new users, change users' passwords, or provisioning, or give them rights and roles or security classes. That security UI can only be opened by either the admin user or a user that has provisioning to get into it. So just remember that if you're looking to use it, that you do need the proper rights to get there. And then the actual service files for the host. Foreground is ACC service host, and you've also got a background service that you can run, the Windows service host.exe. So again, the same way with some of the other products, you can run it either in the foreground or as a service. So those are the two files you would use there. You will see your Accelatis Unified Activity Filter, which is actually called accunifilter.exe. So that's in this directory. And then the configuration utility is called ascensionconfigure.exe. And again, a lot of these ones that I'm pointing out to you do have shortcuts right under the Accelatis runtime directory, but that's where they're pointing to. And you can really run these files just by double-clicking on the exe and launching the shortcut however you want, whatever's easier for you. And down here I just wanted to note that the folders needed for a non-server client UI, you need the client directory, you need the plugins directory, you don't need JWS6 at all, in case you're copying from a server that has it. And then you're probably going to want report definitions just in case your client is actually making some reports. I'm going to try to fly through the Unix file structure. We have a parent folder on the Unix side called ACC Agent Runtime. Again, doesn't have to be that name, but that's the typical name. And you can see under here the file structure similar to Windows. We just have a bunch of stuff under here. ACC config.properties under that parent is where you would go to set up the main database connections and tell it where it needs to go to. And other than that, really, the bin directory contains your stop and start scripts, including some Java pathing for the server in those stop start scripts, just in case that ever changes. There is also a setenv.sh, which contains pathing for the server. There's a configuration directory here that contains configuration files for Apache. Normally you don't have to touch that, but in the case that you might need to make some modifications, that's where the configuration files reside. There is an endorsed file that I can't even tell you what's in there, but there's a couple of files that we do need to run. You will probably never need to look in there. There's a lib directory which contains jar files for the execution. There's a logs directory. The important thing to remember with the logs directory, ACC agent.log, is the Accelatis agent log file. So when we're looking to trace out things that are going on, that's the log we're going to use. There's also a SQL scripts directory similar to Windows. Same thing, you can create or upgrade the Accelatis database. There's a temp directory that Apache uses for some files to work. The web apps directory is really where everything is happening. The base directory contains this war file, which is acc-unix-agent.war. Once startup is initialized, the war file is exploded. I just wanted to walk over this quick because what happens is it actually creates a brand new directory under there called acc-unix-agent, and if you were ever to replace the war file or update it, you just need to stop the service, delete the folder, put the new war file in place, and start the service. So this directory can go away. It's going to get recreated every time you start. JWS6, if it's on Unix, is actually the same exact thing as on Windows. There is no difference there. And the only other thing I wanted to pull up here was activity tracking can reside on a Unix server, and if it does, just a couple of directories in the folder structure. There's a bin directory which contains the stop-start scripts. There's a configuration UI called config.sh. And then there's also a launcher file which should be owned by the root user, and the way that you would do that is you could run the little root.sh that's in here as root, and it should look something just like I have on the presentation here. And there's a lib directory with some jar files in it, and a logs directory that contains some logs. So again, nothing crazy there. And I just wanted to take a second to show you some working examples here underneath my sandbox environment under my Accelatis directory. You can see that I have actually many versions of the Accelatis product as we get new ones coming out. I just rename this Accelatis runtime, and it doesn't really matter what I name it. Everything underneath will still run. So generally I give it a new name. And if I double click, here's all of those shortcut files that I mentioned before. You could find almost everything under here. Launch the Accelatis UI is deploymentmanager.exe. Launch agent configure is your Accelatis configuration tool. Launch your security manager will get you to that security tool. And again, as you go down the line here, just everything that you would really in everyday life need to click on, we've got some sort of a shortcut there. I wanted to point out quickly too that in this structure, if you go into some of these, parent folders like server, you see a bunch of other folders in here. For the most part, you won't really need to do much with these, but just know that you've got some things that should make perfect sense to you. There's a logs file under the server directory, so that if you are debugging that server, some log files will get put in there for you. And I think that's about it. I believe on the Unix side here, even if I were to show you what I've got on the Unix side, there's not a whole lot different than what I've explained here. Everything should make pretty good sense. But that's really, the folder structures, what's in there, and really what you can do with it. So next session next week is going to be on, boy, I really got to change this custom script module. So we're going to go over how to create and import batch files or command files or shell scripts into this module to help you use it. Again, it's a super powerful module. There's a lot to it, but next week we're going to peel into it and show you a little bit more about what you can do with it. So again, the email addresses are up. You can email me directly, cchikowski@accelatis.com, or you can email the support mailbox at support@accelatis.com. Any questions, comments, some stuff you want to see in this 15-minute long session, we'd be happy to show it to you. Thanks again for attending, everybody, and have a great day.